Hello Internet, my name is the Golden Stalfos, and today we are finally going to talk about Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and why it is one of the worst games that I have played in a long time. This game came out 3 years ago, and why it is one of the worst games that I have played in a long time. This game came out 3 years ago. That statement still holds true. So, what's the deal? Now, there's a couple of dimensions to this. First of all, the game is bad, right? Like, objectively, on several levels, bad. There are good things about it, don't get me wrong, but it's very, very bad. Very poorly designed and very poorly implemented. Now, this in and of itself wouldn't be that bad, right? Like, I've been a fan of Zelda and Metroid for a long time, so I'm used to really bad, underwhelming, off-brand entries into the series that just make me want to die. Like, we've been there, right? Like we all remember Other M and Trains and Federation Force. Ugh. And honestly, even Samus Returns. Like, I'll do a whole video about that too, but like, that game was god-awful. It was worse than the original, honestly. And it comes with the added benefit of being a complete betrayal of a, fan team who worked really hard to show their love and support for Nintendo by spending 10 years of their life building a much better remake. And then Nintendo DMCA'd them and made this game solely to justify that DMCA. So fuck Samus Returns. But yeah, I had a lot of experience with bad games, and I have a lot of experience with bad games in franchises that I love. So that's fine, right? Like, it's whatever, But typically, when a game is bad, people accept it. People rally around it and are like, yeah, look at this shit. But not so with Breath of the Wild. With Breath of the Wild, it got universal praise. And anyone who tried to not praise it, even to the slightest degree, was attacked by fanboys. And, wow. Like, seriously? Like, there's only a handful of videos I've ever seen that even attempt to say something negative about this game. There was Zelda with a Side of Salt, which was like this whole series, which was quite good. I think someone else who had salt in their name also did a video about it. See, salt is one of those things that shows up in names so often that I kind of get the people who use it mixed up. Like, there's the Salt Factory and the Salty Gamer, and like there's a bunch of them. And I think Zelda with the Side of Salt was by Scott Falco. Or if it wasn't, he also did a video that made fun of it to a certain extent. But honestly, those things never go that deep in making fun of it. And there's a lot to make fun of here. And some of it is more obvious to me than it might be to the average person, because I have a little bit of a programming background. And so, like, there are some things in the game that on the surface look pretty cool, but from a programmer's perspective are just like intro level crap. Like, I would be embarrassed if I turned in this cooking system as a school project because it's so pathetic and one-dimensional. And wow, how did you publish this? So let's start there. The way the cooking system works on a fundamental level is there are two kinds of items. There are ingredients and there are cooked items, right? And both kinds of items can have exactly one extra effect added onto them, right? So they all restore health, but they can have one extra effect, right? So they can provide a bonus to stealth or heat resistance or whatever, right? And so the way the system works is you put in a number of ingredients and then it checks two things. It checks the category of the ingredient, right? So is it a mushroom? Is it a fruit? Is it a meat? Or is it a green? And I think those are the four categories as far as I can tell. No, I think fish is counted separately from meat. And there might be a separate category for crustaceans aside from regular fish, but I'm not 100% on that. Yeah, that's about it. And then it checks the type, right? And so whatever the type benefit is. And if all of the items in the recipe have the same type attribute, then that is carried over to the cooked item. And if not, no attribute is carried over to the cooked item. That's it. That's as complex as it gets. And then the cooked items are just, an item with a list of the different types of things that can make it, right? So if all of your things are mushrooms, you're guaranteed a mushroom skewer, regardless of what kind of mushrooms you put in. If all of your things are meat, you're guaranteed a meat platter, no matter what kind of meat you put in, right? If you have fruit and vegetables, then you get a hearty, or you get like a fruits and greens platter, I think is what I can't remember all the names, but that's the basic system, right? And programmatically speaking, that is exceedingly basic. Like literally so basic, I would have been embarrassed to use that in a project semester 1. No joke. And since this is a system that takes up so much of the game because so many assets are devoted to being ingredients or foods, and this completely replaces your previous healing mechanics, and this is where all of the quote-unquote survival elements come into play, it's really weird that this system is so fucking basic. Now, there is a special case in this system because there are certain food ingredients that are only made when specific combinations of items are put together. They're the special recipes that you can find hidden throughout the land. And they're different, right? Like they don't care about the item attribute or the item type. All they care about is the item name. So if these 5 specific named ingredients are included, then you get this thing. And if they're not, then you don't. And so it's just a preset thing that's, literally just a hard-coded if this, then that, right? And that's it. That's the whole system. They have one system for automatically generating items out of, very basic category plus effect, and one separate but very much related system for generating specific items out of specific inputs. And that's it. And it's literally that simple. And the fact that I was able to tell that it was that simple just by playing the game isn't good. Right? Like think about it this way. On a surface level, this is basically the same cooking system that was in Paper Mario on the N64. Right? Like it's the same as that. You know, you go into your cook person and you say, hey, I have a mushroom and a honey. Cook them up. And then you get a honey mushroom every time, right? Unless you sometimes make a mistake, right? Which is also in this game. And my point is, this is a cooking system that is 1, very basic, 2, very easy to program, and 3, has been used in games literally for decades. And it's like one of the core features that they sold the game on. It's not impressive. It's not new. It's not particularly well implemented. It's dumb. Every single ingredient you can use to cook can come in every single category, right? Like, there is a snail for each kind of elemental effect. There is an herb for each elemental effect. There is a fruit for each different elemental effect, right? And they're different fruits, right? Like the watermelon and the mighty banana are different, but not as far as the game is concerned. As far as the cooking system is concerned, they're both fruits, you know, because they fall in the category of fruit. That's it. You know, you cook 5 bananas and 5 watermelons, you get the same fucking dish, but with a slightly different element effect on it. Go try it. So yeah, that system is super basic and super boring, and nothing to write home about. So why is it such a big part of their marketing and stuff? Like, why are they acting like this is so revolutionary? Like, it's different for Zelda, but you know, it also removes all of the difficulty. In this game, there are items that provide temporary HP as well as, you know, maxing out your current HP. So basically, you can have 3 pages of full heals. You know, just guaranteed full heals. Just blue potion, like better than blue potion, because you get temp HP on top, right? So just, you know, 4 bottles is too many, but no, we're just going to throw in 80 fucking blue potions and call it a day. Like, who cares? I mean, literally no amount of enemy tweaking could have made up for that insane, like, just destruction of the difficulty right there. But don't worry, we'll get to how shit the difficulty is later on. So the next thing that might surprise you, or might not if you've actually played the game, is that they use a very similar system with the weapons and shields and so forth. So basically, the way it works is there's 3 categories of weapon plus a shield and a bow, right? Your weapon can be a sword, a big sword, or a spear. That's it. Those are the 3 categories. Right? You have one-handed melee, two-handed melee, and spear. And they advance in categories, right? So you have, at the very beginning of the game, right, you can fight some bokoblins and take their wooden clubs, and you get a boko club, right? And so that's a sword-type weapon made of wood, right? It's just a boko club, right? But then the enemies get a little bit stronger, and instead of having just the regular boko club, they have the spiked boko club, right? And then the enemies get a little bit stronger, and now they have the spiked dragon bone boko club. Well, no, that's the 4th version. The first it goes to dragon bone, then spiked dragon bone. Sorry, ruined the build-up. But my point is that progression is applied to every single weapon in the game, right? The Lizalfos start out with a boomerang, then a double boomerang, then a tri-boomerang, right? with the Guardian weapons, they literally just slap a plus sign on the end of the name because they don't even care. Can't even be bothered to come up with a reason why it's better. It's just it's an axe plus plus. Go for it. Lazy, pathetic shit that I would be embarrassed to turn in on an intro level project. No fucking joke. Of course, they also do the same thing with enemies, right? The weakest bokoblins are red, and then the slightly stronger ones are blue, and then the slightly stronger ones again are white, and then you've got the zebra ones or whatever, like it just keeps going up in this. They just palette swap to make them stronger, because it's fucking 1986 and we don't have enough memory space for our sprites, so we just got to palette swap them. Like, that's the fucking problem, right? That was a shitty corner-cutting space-saving measure 30 years ago when Zelda 1 came out. And to go back to that's just pathetic. It's absolutely pathetic. And this brings me to the next point of enemy variety. I counted, there are 17 unique kinds of enemies in the game, not counting the Ganon fights. That's literally all of them. 17. And like half of those are mini bosses, right? On the mini boss roster, you've got Lynel's, the Molduga, which only appears in the desert, so why even bother? Like, I literally went 30 hours before I saw one. The Lynel's, the Molduga, the Hinox, and the big stone dudes, whatever the fuck they were called. That's it. And that's a huge chunk of your 17, right? Oh, and I guess you could count Moblins as being kind of towards the mini boss area. I mean, they're way bigger than regular bokoblins, and but so I guess 5 maybe, depending on how you count it. And like on the roster of enemies, like half of them are new and the other half are legacy, but it's still a really small number of enemies, right? Like why is it such a small number of enemies? I mean, there are more enemies than that in like the first 2 levels of Ocarina of Time. I mean, and I mean, some people will be quick to point out, wait, you're forgetting there are skeleton versions of some of those enemies, and there's, fire, ice, and lightning versions of some of those enemies. And no, I'm not forgetting that. Those are not different enemies. They're the same enemy with the same movement patterns and the same, attacks and strategies. And they're really boring. And by the way, the only strategy that the enemies have is if you don't have a weapon, pick up a weapon. If you do have a weapon, attack Link. That's it. That's the extent of their AI. That's all they can do. They have no greater strategy, and there's no complexity to their attacks because, well, going back to the weapon variety, there's only 3 kinds of weapons, and they each have only 2 attacks. 1 regular, 1 charged. And the charged attack is just the regular attack, but bigger. So really, any enemy can only have 1 attack based on the weapon they're holding, and that's it. And you'll never get any more variety than that. And so it doesn't matter if they're an element variant, because their weapon is the only thing that matters. And yeah, it's really dumb. I mean, the Stalfos versions technically provide a gameplay difference in that, you know, you can break them into pieces and then kill their head, but all that really does is make them weaker, you know? And it doesn't really change their AI at all. It just makes them, you know, easier to kill. They're still the same model, basically. I don't really see the point in it. So yeah, that's it. Oh, I suppose if you wanted to, you could also count the Guardians as mini bosses. I probably would, actually. It's just hard to think of them that way because by the late game you're one-shotting them. Which again is stupid. So far what we've covered is a really basic, very generic food crafting system, which, you know, is about as straightforward and one-to-one as you could possibly get. You've got a very basic weapon system where weapons are clearly just upgraded versions of each other, sometimes without any changes to their model or what they do. And the same goes for enemies. And we've got a really shitty, tiny number of enemies compared to any game in this franchise or out of it. Zelda 1 had more enemies than this game. That's pathetic. You know? Also, you know, like, the 17 different kinds of enemies could be viable if you did it in a good way, right? Like if you were building, you know, carefully structured encounters that use the different enemy patterns in specific ways. You know, like Doom only has like a handful of different enemy kinds. The original Doom, not the 2016 game, only has a handful of different enemy types, but the way they appear in the rooms and the fact that each of them serves a different purpose and has a different AI allow you to build a bunch of unique and interesting encounters with those enemies. And you can feel, you know, satisfied going through the whole game that way, right? So like, you know, you can be busy dodging the fast enemies while you're plugging bullets into the heavy enemies, you know, or whatever. But Breath of the Wild doesn't do that. All the enemies have the same AI. They just attack. And their attacks are very basic. And they, as far as deciding which attack to use when, they just go down the list, right? Like they don't have any sort of like trigger point where, oh, if they're this distance, you use this attack, and if they're over here, you use this attack. No. First of all, the only enemy with more than one viable attack is the Lynel. And secondly, the Lynel just does all of their moves in sequence. Unless one of them becomes impossible because of your position. But even then, like, they sometimes still just try to do that move and then move on to the next one in the list. It's so sad. There's no complexity to it whatsoever. It's like baby's first AI. And I don't want to be mean to the people who worked on this game, because there were a lot of them and they clearly did a lot of work. But whoever was in charge of the things that actually affect gameplay was not given the time or resources to make anything remotely good. So, yeah. That. So let's talk about how combat actually works. And this is one of the few things that Joseph Anderson actually criticized in his video, so go watch that if you're interested. But it's a very basic system where you always take at least 1 damage whenever you're hit. Each 1 point of damage corresponds to 1 quarter heart in the game, and your armor just reduces the amount of damage you take by a flat amount, right? So if they're attacking with a weapon that deals 10 damage and you have 8 armor, you take 2 damage, right? And that's it. That's how the whole game works. That's all the damage numbers. So if you get really high level armor and upgrade it, then every attack will be worthless. You know, some attacks have higher minimum damage outputs than the just 1 point, but overall, that's how the system works. And it's really simple and really pathetic. And, you know, it's easy to tell whether or not you have the best weapon because you can just see whether or not it's the highest step on the chain. You know, if your Guardian Axe only has 1+ instead of 3, I think. It's 2 or 3. It's 3 tiers, but I can't remember how many pluses it gets. It's an off by 1 error. No, I'm pretty sure it's 2 pluses. Then you know you need to upgrade, right? And that's it. You know, if you're carrying a Traveler's Sword, then you need to upgrade to the Royal Sword because that's the best one. Or it might be the Royal Guard Sword. I can't remember. You know, the ones you find in Hyrule Castle. And that's it. That's how the game works. Your shield, same diff. Like same thing. Like it just has a number representing how much it can block, and then it stops being able to do that when it runs out. But you don't get to see that number. You don't get to see what the durability is until it hits 0, which is dumb. Very, very dumb. See, in most games that have durability systems, which, I mean, this game is by no means rare in that category. But in most games that have a durability system, there's a little bar that shows how much durability is left, or like a number, right? Somewhere where it's like, you know, this one has 50 durability and it's currently at 20, right? Something like that. But those numbers are not shown to the player in any way, so you never know if an item is going to break until like 2 hits before it breaks. And it starts flashing weapon at risk. And then you like whatever. But also it doesn't matter if your weapons break. You just hit something until your weapon breaks, then pause, then switch. Then hit something until your weapon breaks, then pause, then switch. And there's no point in switching ahead of time because you can't see durability, so you don't know how much is left on any given weapon if you do switch around. So you want to keep using the same one until it breaks. That way you know how much is left. So, yeah. Combat sucks. The enemy have very shit AI with no unique moves. They all just use their regular weapons, and their regular weapons suck. I mean, that's basically it. I mean, the Listolvos can spit at you, I guess. That's something, technically. The Moblin can pick up a dude and throw it at you, technically. But, like, only if there's a dude around. And really, that's the same AI as go to weapon, then use weapon. Just that they expand the definition of weapon for that one enemy. You know? Like, that's it. That's the combat. Pick up weapon, then use weapon. All enemies use that same AI. I think the Hinox doesn't have a weapon, so it just flails its arms. But it also doesn't have an interesting attack pattern, and it's big and slow, and you aren't. So, you know, have fun fighting the Asylum Demon's retarded younger brother. Like, that's basically what it amounts to. even has a giant glowing weak point. Now, to be fair, combat in Zelda games has never been that complex. I mean, Twilight Princess tried to step it up by giving you a lot more unique sword actions and increasing the number of items you can use outside, dungeon items that you can use in combat and their variety. But, it was still pretty simple. And Skyward Sword tried to spice things up by having you use, sword swinging directions, but it was still really basic. And actually, it got even more basic because every single enemy was like, oh, I'm blocking this way, so now you have to swing that way. Like, every single enemy. So it just gets boring and repetitive instead of being like a cool gameplay feature. But honestly, I would have preferred a more simplistic combat system where you only have one weapon with one basic animation. Because, then they could have not spent a bunch of time developing, thousands of different versions of the same 3 shit weapons, and could have instead spent that time on, building a good game. Seriously, how much of the time in this game was spent on the food and the weapons and the enemies without thinking about how those things actually impact the game? At all. No thought at all was clearly spent on that. Because if there was, then someone would have realized that, hey, maybe having 500 healing items kind of undermines things, and maybe we shouldn't do that. Or, hey, letting our players just level up their armor until they can guarantee block every single attack down to its minimum damage level might reduce the difficulty a bit and make it kind of unfun. And the response that they had to that, because clearly someone did bring that complaint in, so the response they had was, well, let's just make everything be a one-shot in the early part of the game. That was their solution. People won't realize how shit our difficulty is if we just crank the numbers so that they have no room for mistakes early on. Then we'll still get good reviews, and no one will realize that we actually made a really shitty, undifficult game that, has nothing interesting in its moment-to-moment combat gameplay. Because, yeah, that's exactly what they did. That was their fix. I don't understand it. I mean, in the original version of the game, the day 1 release, when you attack the Ganon monsters, right, you can shoot them in the eye with an arrow, which, of course, you're going to do that because it's Zelda. But when you do that, they instantly fall to the ground, and then you can hit them. And that just is how you do the fight. But I guess they realized at some point that makes these fights stupendously easy and simple and pathetic. And so what they did is, at some point, they patched it so that, shooting them in the eye doesn't make them automatically fall down. It just does some damage, which, I guess, whatever. But, I mean... if you're going to patch something about the game, there's a lot of stuff I would have patched before your 4 shitty boss fights. Like the fact that you only have 4 shitty boss fights. Okay. So... you might have noticed that so far I've spent all of my time talking about the underlying systems and why those systems are both individually not very impressive and don't really go well together, because they don't, and they aren't. But the reason I'm doing that is because this game was designed system first. It was not designed with combat or fun gameplay in mind. It was designed specifically with the idea of flexibility and letting the player combine a bunch of different things. I think they refer to it as emergent gameplay, and stuff like that. The developer did a whole GDC talk about it. But, I don't think any of those systems were worth developing, and they really don't add anything to the game experience because they're really shallow and not very well made. So, nice. One last system we need to talk about before we can get on to non-system related things. Actually, two. But first, the weather. So, in this game, there's a complex system for weather. Well, it seems complex at first, but really it's very simple. See, in each area, there are predefined weather statuses that can be applied, and the game just regularly cycles through them. And they are pretty dynamic and interesting, like if you're in the desert, you can stand in the shade and it's not as hot because that's how real life works, so why not? But it's cool that they thought to program that in, but how much time went to programming that in when they could have been building content that would have been fun, that's the real problem here, is were these systems more worthwhile of their development time than anything else? And I would argue that no, they definitely were not. I would take enemy variety over, ooh, look, the shade is realistic 1,000 times. Right? 1,000 times. So there's a handful of basic weather effects that can be applied, hot, cold, rain, night and day, obviously. Thunderstorms, which is just rain, but fuck you even more. In general, rain is just kind of fuck you. How dare you try to play our game and enjoy our core exploration mechanics? We're going to make it rain, so you can't use those core exploration mechanics. Go fuck yourself. That's it. Just go fuck yourself. I can't believe you would try to play the game right now. Oh, wait, you don't like the rain, so you want to wait until it goes away? Well, you can only wait at campfires, bitch. There's no escape from the rain. You will wait in the rain forever. And then they decided, rain isn't fucking the player over enough, so let's also add thunderstorms, which electrocute the player if they have anything metal on them. But don't tell the player that, and don't make it clear that that's what's happening. Just, make their whole body start sparking, and then blast them with, the wrath of Zeus for 8,000 health points. Because fuck you. I mean, seriously, when you think about it, sure, fine. Thunderstorms will strike the metal thing, whatever. But it doesn't say that anywhere. There's no player training, no warning, nothing. It's just, you're in a thunderstorm, and then suddenly, spark, 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 boom! And you have no idea why you went boom. And you think, oh shit, thunderstorms just mean I get fucked, okay, let's run. And so you try to run or get away from it somehow, but then it starts up again, spark, 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 boom! And you have no time to react, no time to understand anything, you're just boom! And every time you get hit, your character ragdolls for 10 minutes until the next shot, and it's just come on, what the fuck? Was this necessary? Why? And the in the trailers and shit, when they talk about this mechanic, they're like, oh, it's so cool because you can throw your weapon at an enemy and it'll make them explode. And I'm like, okay, first of all, that's fucking retarded. Second of all, the enemies already have metallic weapons on them and they aren't getting electrocuted, so I call bullshit. Third of all, why? Why did you think this would be fun? I'm already dealing with this shitty rain mechanic that just limits my mobility options in a game that's supposed to be about exploration. Why are you gonna hit me with automatic unavoidable damage on top of that, you stupid cunt? And you might say, oh, well, you can just unequip all your metal weapons. Okay, what if I don't have any non-metal weapons? What then, bitch? Am I just screwed? Because I didn't think to go out of my way to prepare a shitty wooden weapon? I mean, come on, what the fuck? Anyway, so that's the weather. It's just a very shitty generic system that tries to fuck over the player and interrupt core gameplay for no reason. And the most interesting it ever gets is saying, ooh, it's hot now, better put on your heat resistant stuff, or ooh, it's cold now, better put on your cold resistant stuff, which, like, I guess is interesting, but I mean, it's not new. Like, lots of games have systems like that where you need, hot resist and cold resist. It's just kind of simple and lame, and I don't think it really adds anything to the experience. Okay, so the last system I want to talk about is the riding system, which is a very small system, honestly. So in the game, you can ride horses. That's it. That's the whole thing. You walk up to a random horse, you jump on it, you have to play a little QTE game for a minute, and then that's it. Now you can ride that animal, take it to a stable, and it becomes your horse forever. Now the problem here, as with in most cases, is that they didn't think through this mechanic at all. Because it's also possible to hop onto and do the little mini game and ride around on several other things besides horses. You can do it to elk and bears and the spirit of Satoru Iwata, and even skeleton horses. But you can't keep any of those because that would be fun, and this game doesn't let you have fun. That's the only reason. It would be fun to ride around Hyrule on a grizzly bear, therefore you are not allowed to do that. As soon as you get off, it runs away and you will never catch it. That's it. That's your lot. And why? I just gotta ask why. Surely you could have done it such that we could keep those things and ride around on them, and it would be fun and interesting. But you didn't, because this game is shitty and thinks that quote-unquote realism is more important than fun. Which, one, it's not, and two, it's not realistic in the first place. I mean, there is no reason I should be able to grapple onto a grizzly bear that happens to be charging at me. That's stupid. Oh, also, when I was mentioning the enemies earlier, I didn't mention the animals, like the grizzly bear and the fox and the wolf and so forth, because they almost never attack you, and they're really just there so you can collect meat. They aren't enemies. They're environmental things like trees. But But there are, a handful of animals in the environment too. So I suppose those do require a similar amount of work as enemies, but they don't provide a similar gameplay function. So, meh. Whatever. But yeah, like, this just kind of underlines everything about the game. Like, they created this system, and at first you think the system is kind of cool, but what difference does it make if it's kind of cool if it doesn't serve gameplay and in fact undercuts cool gameplay ideas? Right? Like, if you weren't so system focused, you would have seen, oh, hey, players riding grizzly bears, that'd be fucking awesome. And you would have done that. But instead you were like, no, we need to focus on systems. We'll make the stable guy freak out if you bring him a bear. And that'll be just as good. Like, why? Why would you do that? Do you just hate fun? Are you in video game business because you hate fun? What? Come on. And like, really, it's the same thing with the rain. Like, it would be cool to have a system where weather exists and behaves realistically. But, like, it's not fun that it interferes with your core gameplay mechanic of climbing. And it's not fun that you can't wait out the rain because you can't start a fire and, use that to wait out the rain. And, like, it's thematically resonant that there are certain parts in the game where it's always raining because, plot. But it's not fun that those areas are always raining, And, like, Nintendo used to be one of the only companies that was like, fun first, dumb shit later. And this just really goes against that. Systems first, because systems are interesting. But one, your systems aren't that complex or interesting. And two, they don't make the game more fun. And sometimes they actively undercut the fun parts of the game. So now let's talk about content. Let's talk about the parts of the game that were built to be fun and not built to be systems. So first, the core gameplay loop of exploration. You climb up a tall thing, you hang glide down from tall thing. You climb up another tall thing, you hang glide down from the tall thing. That's the core loop. You can climb any surface as long as it's not raining or inside of a dungeon or shrine, because fuck you. Like, I literally have no other idea why they would do that except that they hate fun and don't want the climbing system to interact with the puzzle system because so yeah, you can climb anything. You can climb ice for some reason, like, you can't climb a wet wall, but you can climb ice. That's whatever. And climbing depletes your stamina, so you have to wait in an area where you're not climbing to refill your stamina and then start climbing again. And that's it. That's the whole mechanic. You try your best to brute force your way up the side of a mountain, like how you used to do in Skyrim or Oblivion, if you actually played the good one. Where you're just like, oh, my objective marker is over here on the other side of this mountain, so I'll just fucking walk directly towards my objective marker. I mean, going around the mountain might be faster, but who gives a shit? I'm walking through this fucking mountain. And so you go up, and you just force yourself up the geometry however you can. You jump, you get your horse to jump, whatever, until you fucking get there. And it's like that, except as a formalized mechanic that has specific limitations. So, less fun. Sorry. Yeah. And then you can, once you've gotten to a high place, you sail down in your hang glider thing, and it's fun. It's a fun gameplay loop. You can climb up and then you can hang glide down. It's very fun. It's also worth noting that this gameplay loop is completely incongruous with the system of horses, because you cannot go up an incline with a horse. Like, seriously, if a horse is on any sort of incline, if it's like 2 degrees incline, nope. Horse says no. The horses are basically useless outside of the roads and the plains. Anything else, and they just stop dead in their tracks, which is boring and dumb. And it also means that I rode a horse for approximately 10 minutes out of my entire 200 hours with the game. And it's 200 hours because I completed the game twice. And when I say completed, I mean I did every shrine. I got every single piece of armor and upgraded it fully. And I beat all 4 dungeons and Ganon. I didn't get all the Korok seeds because I love myself and no one has time for that. And I already knew that it from other people that you just get a golden poop, which I didn't want, so I didn't do that. But I beat all of the content in the game and maxed out all of the equipment in the game twice. So believe me when I say that I know how this game works. And the way it works is shit. Okay. So, that out of the way. So, your core gameplay loop of climbing doesn't interact well with the weather system, doesn't interact well with the horse system, and has absolutely jack shit to do with the enemy system or the combat system or the cooking system, because you can't really fight or do any cooking while you're climbing. So, the first fun part of the game that we've talked about has nothing to do with any of the other parts of the game we've talked about and is actively hindered by some of them. Gee, what emergent gameplay. So, then you've got your 4 runes, which are basically your auto puzzle solving toolkit. You have bombs, you have a magnet power, an ice power, and a make things hold still power. Bombs work the same way they have in every Legend of Zelda game, except that there's 2 versions of them, one of which rolls and the other doesn't. They're activated remotely instead of being on a timer. You have an infinite stock of them, and because you have an infinite stock of them, there's a cooldown timer between each use of a bomb. Oh, and they do like way less damage than they did in any previous game because you have an infinite stock of them. So, yeah. Cool. The magnet power is neat. You can just, pick up anything that's made of metal and fling it around. The controls are a little bit janky, and you can't really, move your character around very easily while you're doing it, but it's whatever. It works. It's cool. You basically just use it for moving objects in your puzzles. That's it. The ice power can make 3 blocks of ice. If you try to make a 4th one, then the first one you made disappears. And it can only be used on a body of water. Doesn't matter if the water is moving or stationary, but has to be enough water for you to make ice. And that's it. I guess you can also use it to break blocks of ice, like the ones that are generated by the boss in the elephant dungeon, but I'll get to that later. And the stasis power just like makes things stop moving for a few seconds until the power runs out, and then they start moving again, and then it has a cooldown timer before you can use it again. And that's it. I mean, you can add momentum to things that are frozen, so you can send them flying. There's a couple of minigames around that, and like speedrunners use this tactic to break the physics engine, but like I don't give a shit. Like, breaking the physics engine is not why I come to Legend of Zelda. I think, I mean, like, come on. That much at least should be clear. You know, this isn't fucking Gary's mod. This, you know, this is Zelda. We're not here for the physics engine. We're here for the fun gameplay. So, that. And those are what you have instead of dungeon items. And you get all 4 within the first hour of the game, and you never get any more. And they never really get any better. There is a place where you can, quote-unquote, upgrade them, but I honestly didn't notice any difference between the original version and the upgraded version, so... Oh, and when you go to the place where you can upgrade them, you also get the ability to take pictures! Because, you know, what game nowadays doesn't have a selfie camera in it? You know, to be hip and fit in with the cool kids. Because, yeah, the number one thing I always wanted in my Zelda games was a fucking selfie cam. I really wanted to be able to take pictures of items so I can catalog them. Like, seriously? What is this shit? Why? Why do I need to catalog random items? Well, why do I need to take a picture of every single consumable and ingredient and everything in the entire fucking game world? That's so stupid. What? Needless to say, I never did that either, because fuck it, but... and sometimes it's used for side quests, right? Like, there's this shrine that has like a broken tablet, and the pieces are strewn across the beach and shit, and you have to go photograph each piece so you can collect them together and read the inscription, and I'm just like, why? Why do you have such a stupid, asinine mechanic? How many man-hours went into programming this stupid, asinine bullshit that could have been put towards enemy variety, or making shrines that don't suck ass? Like, seriously, why did you waste so much time on this dumb crap? You could have had a good game if you didn't waste so much time on this dumb crap. You know? It's not like this game's had 5 fucking years to be developed and then released with 17 different enemies in its entire fucking game. You know? Why? Alright, now that I've explained about the puzzle solving tools, I guess I should talk about the shrines. So the shrines broadly fall into 3 categories. There's the gimmick shrines, the combat shrines, and the puzzle shrines. The gimmick shrines are the fewest and farthest between, and they don't have anything particularly interesting going on. They just, you know, have a weird gimmick. There's a handful of shrines that have a motion control puzzle where the solution is just flip your controller upside down and then flick the orb onto the platform. That's the solution. I don't know what else you want. Yeah. And there's a couple of shrines at the top of these twin mountains where you go into one shrine and these orbs are laid out in a grid, and the grid pattern from Shrine A is the solution to Shrine B, and the grid pattern from Shrine B is the solution to Shrine A. So you have to, like, take a picture of one, then go outside, then warp over to the other one, then take a picture of that and solve it, and then go back, or just look at a walkthrough, because that makes more sense and is less stupid. And also, it means you can't solve one shrine until you've encountered the other one. So if you don't realize that there's another shrine on the other side of the mountain, then you just won't be able to solve it. Nice. What a great fun gimmick. And there's a handful of other stupid things like that. Then the combat shrines. Oh, actually, there's a fourth category I forgot to mention. The Shrines of Blessing. So let's talk about those. The Shrines of Blessing are usually, but not always, the shrine that pops up after you complete a challenge in the overworld. Right? So you'll do something in the overworld like beat a Hinox and take its orb and put it on the pedestal. And then the shrine pops up. And then you go into the shrine, and it's just one room. You just walk. It's just a single, basically a hallway. You just walk down to the end, pick up a treasure along the way, and talk to the chick monk thing who gives you a spirit orb, and then you warp out. Now the fun thing about these shrines is they're just copy and pasted and involve literally no work or effort from the developers at all. And they take a bunch of your time, right? Because, okay, so in order to get into the shrine, first, you have to watch the shrine appearing animation, which is annoying. Second, you have to go up to the shrine and put your SHEIKAH slate on it, which is another whole, scene that you have to go through. Then it shows you a scene of the shrine opening up. Then you go into it, and it shows a scene of you descending down. Then you hit a load screen, and load screens take for fucking ever in this game. Then there's another animation of Link going down. You can skip most of these animations just by mashing the skip button, but you still have to watch the first second or two of it before it'll actually skip. Then you walk up to the treasure chest. You open it. There's a new animation for that, which you can't skip. Then there's a text box that appears and tells you what's in the thing. And then, if you don't have any room in your inventory that specific item goes to, then it goes back, and you have to, take some stuff out of your inventory in order to pick it up, and then watch the picking it up from the chest animation all over again. Then you go talk to the dude who gives you the orb, and you have to mash A through their text boxes for several seconds, and then you get the orb, and it's like, blah, 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 you got the orb, and it puts a big ass text box on your screen that you have to close out, and then it pops up and shows the orb in your inventory, and you have to close that out, and then you warp to the surface through another scene that you can skip, and hit a second load screen, and then you appear on the surface with another scene that you can skip. All of that every time you go into a shrine. Any shrine. But in a Shrine of Blessing, there's nothing in between. It's just 3 solid minutes of fucking you about. You just, watch the first half second of a cutscene 7 times. Sit through 2 unbearably long load screens. Deal with some annoying text boxes. Just all in a row. And it's so fucking annoying, and I hate it. I hate it so much. So there's that. Then there's the Shrine of Combat. The Shrine of Combat comes in 3 forms: easy, medium, and difficult. That's it. It's the same enemy with the same attack patterns and the same gear. The only difference is that on easy mode, it's carrying 1 weak item. On medium mode, it's carrying 2 mid-tier items. And on hard mode, it's carrying 3 good items. Plus, its health increases each time as well. But the way it uses those items is the same. It does the same spinning moves, the same slash, like it's the same all the way through. It's the same enemy. There can also be some variation with the environment. Sometimes the floor is wet, so you can make pillars out of ice. Sometimes there are pillars already in the room. Sometimes you have to use magnesis to pull up the pillars. And that's it. Those are the 3 varieties. But guess what? The pillars don't actually factor into the fight all that much, and you don't have to use them at all. So functionally 3 identical empty rooms with the same identical enemy. And there's about 20 or so of these as well. So about 40-ish of the 120 shrines are literally just empty rooms with no new gameplay or anything interesting in them at all. Cool. Now we get to the puzzle shrines. And these also fall into 2 categories. The good ones and the other ones. So I've already mentioned the 4 shrine solving tools you get right at the beginning. But in addition, there are some internal shrine mechanics, right? So there's these yellow orbs that go into these yellow sockets, and when you do that, something in the shrine activates. Usually it's a door or whatever. There are switches, which whenever you hit them, activate something, right? There are torches that can be lit with fire. And there's wind. Yeah. The fire and wind are kind of, I think they're part of the weather system, technically, because things that are made of wood can burn, and when something burns, it starts a updraft, right? And in the game, this looks kind of impressive the first few times you see it, but if you think about how it's programmed, it just means that when they're making items, or pieces of the environment or whatever, they just tag the thing with flammable or non-flammable, and anything that's flammable can have a flame effect applied to it, and anything that's non-flammable doesn't. And then they just tag the weather system to start making wind after enough fire is in one spot, which it looks impressive, but it's really basic, and honestly something you could do at home in an hour if you wanted to. I mean, you wouldn't have all the visuals to go with it. You'd have to do a text-based readout on your command prompt or whatever, but you could do a system like this in an hour, even if you have almost no experience programming. It's really sad. So yeah, that's it. And then there are also things that are solved just by using your powers, right? So there will be boulders that fall down at you, so you have to make them freeze in place so that you can run past them. There will be, anytime you walk into a room and you see water, you automatically know you have to use the iced power. Anytime you walk into a room and you see falling objects, you might consider using stasis. Anytime you walk into a room and you see something made of metal, use magnesis. That's it. That's literally it. Anytime you see, something with cracks in it, or a little chute where you can put a bomb in, try putting a bomb there. That's it. That's the entire solution to a lot of the puzzles in the bad puzzle rooms. It's literally just one room. You walk in, you see oh, there's water here, I'll use the ice thing. And then as soon as you start using the ice thing, you know exactly where you need to use it because it's fucking obvious. And literally a 3-year-old could figure it out. It's so pathetic. You know, and that's it. That's the whole puzzle. Oh, there is actually one more system I forgot to mention, which also ties into the weather, is the electricity system. That's also in a bunch of shrines. So, you know, metal things conduct electricity, just like wooden things burn. But again, sounds and looks more complex than it really is, programmatically speaking. You know, same logic as before. You just tag anything that's metal to also have, you know, interacts with electricity, right? So in the shrines, there are like, you know, switches that activate when electricity touch them, or, you know, there's like little orbs that are conductive and just have electricity constantly flowing out of them somehow. And so you have to make a path between those orbs and those switches. There's a couple of those. You know, but most of the time when you walk into a room, you know, you see, oh, this room has 5 torches. I guess I gotta light those torches, you know? And the treasure chest in the middle of the room gives me my own torch because they know that you won't have kept a torch with you all this time. So there you go. You know, so it just like gives the game away. You know, you walk in and you see this crystal and you're like, oh, that's the crystal that needs electricity, so I'll just bring the electric thing over to it. You know, you walk in and you see a switch and you're like, oh, I know how switches work. I've played Zelda before. Ping! You know, I mean, it's really fucking basic and very simple. Then there are the good shrines, which there's like 10 or 12 of them. And these are the shrines that, you know, take these ideas and play with them in a kind of interesting way for multiple rooms. And so you almost get the effect of going through like one floor of a dungeon. I say almost because there's no enemies and there's almost never any keys and there's no like, you know, interaction between the rooms or anything. Like, you know, it's just a basic, like, here's the first stage of the idea, here's the slightly more advanced version, etc., until you get to the puzzle they really wanted to put in this room but couldn't because all the shrines have to be self-contained. And you have to be able to do them all in any order, so they all have to be equally easy. So they took a couple of shrines and made them, like, actually have a progression on the idea and build it up until it's, like, good. And there's, like, one of those shrines for each of the mechanics, right? There's one of those for the wind, one of those for the torches, one of those for the switches, one of those for the ice blocks, you know, right? And so like, it's cool, you know, it's cool and all, but there's only like 8 of them, right? Because there's only like 8 of those mechanics, and there's a couple others that like mash it together, some mechanics, so that they can do a little bit more, but they don't get anywhere near as complex as you might expect, given the fact that there's 8 different mechanics they can work with, right? Like, you've got fire, wind, switches, and electricity on the dungeon side, and on the player side, you've got, you know, magnets, time stopping, bombs, and ice making. And, you know, you would think that between those 8 things and weapons and whatnot, you could make an interesting dungeon experience. But they never really do. You know, it's always just like what would be one floor of a dungeon if you added some locked doors and some interaction between rooms and some enemies. And like, some of them would be very good floors of a dungeon if you did those things. But as is, they're just, you know, a progression of puzzles that are kind of interesting, but ultimately don't leave a great impression in the long run. And that's it. That's it. Oh, and I guess there's actually a ninth thing if you consider the putting balls into the sockets. So there's a handful of different things they can work with, but they never really get that complex. And there's only like one good shrine that really explores each idea to any level, and it's only like a low level exploration. It's not like what you would expect from a regular Zelda dungeon. And yeah, that's all the shrines. That's all of them. That's how they all work. Like I said, there's a couple of gimmicky ones. There's some ones where you use stasis to go basically boulder golfing, which is, I guess, interesting, but there's only like 2 of them, and it's just a gimmick, But really, the vast majority of the shrines, I would say at least probably 90 to 100 of them are either bad puzzles, combat, or blessing. And the gimmick shrines don't hold your interest for very long. Like, they're kind of cool ideas, but each of them only gets like 1 or 2 chances to show its stuff, and they're never like that complex because they're just there to be a gimmick. And the puzzle shrines that are actually good, there's only like 10 of them. It's not enough to to carry the rest of the game. So, yeah. Then, dungeons. Let's talk about those. Now, there are 4 dungeons, technically. There's kind of a 5th one with Hyrule Castle, but I'll talk about that last. So there are 4 dungeons. Each one is a sacred beast, right? There's these giant mechanical automatons that were made to fight Ganon, and sometime in the past, Ganon took them over and is controlling them. So in order to save the world and weaken Ganon and restore peace to Hyrule, you have to beat them. Now, it's important to note that if you beat them, you make the final boss battle easier. And it's already really easy before you do that, so but whatever. So each dungeon is in a different part of the world and is tied to a different unique race of the world, right? So there's the Zora are dealing with the elephant, who is constantly raining on them. The Rito are dealing with a bird who just kind of flies over them and looks menacing, but as far as I can tell, that's it. The Gorons are dealing with a big, I guess it's supposed to be a Dodongo that just kind of like crawls on the side of their mountain. The Gerudo are dealing with a camel stomping around the desert causing lightning storms. And yeah. So the way you approach a dungeon is you go up to one of these areas, usually through a very specific plot method, right? Like, in order to get to the Zoro's domain, you're supposed to go up this path and meet Sidon 3 times as you progress through the path, and it's constantly raining, so you can't really climb around the path, you just have to follow it. And in order to get through the Gerudo area, you have to go to this midway point and talk to this dude who will give you an outfit that lets you sneak into the Gerudo town. And then you talk to Urbosa, and then she sends you off to get, well, not Urbosa, Urbosa's daughter, I guess? I don't know, whatever. And she sends you out to get the lightning helmet from the the stealth section. The forced stealth section. Like, look, I understand. Zelda games have had, sections like this where you have to sneak around for a long time. It's in Ocarina. But, oh my god. I cannot think of anything more terrible and contradictory to the game than this. But I'll get to that. When you want to go to the Gerudo area, you have to first stop along the side of the road at a very specific spot and talk to a specific NPC who will sell you potions that make you not burst into flames when you're in the Gerudo area. Without these potions, you will burst into flames. There is an armor that has the same effect, but you can only get that armor from the Gerudo city. Or the Goron city, sorry. Was I saying Gerudo that whole time? Ugh. The Goron city. So yeah, that. And then for the birds, I actually don't know. There doesn't seem to be any specific story thing. You just walk up to the village, and then you talk to the village elder, and then the old owl bro is like, oh yeah, this one dude who was a great warrior, he went out to train and fight. And then you go out to where he is, and you do a little archery minigame for like 10 seconds, and then he takes you up to fight the bird. Like, that's it. It's just very straightforward and simple. And I don't know, maybe they ran out of creative fuel at that point. Who knows? And when you get... Oh, and the Goron area, before you can actually go up and fight the Dodongo, you have to talk to the Gorons and then go rescue Daruk's ancestor, who you have to escort up the mountain while avoiding targeting cones. So it's an escort mission combined with a forced stealth section in a game that doesn't have mechanics for either. Why? Why do you do this to me? Who hurt you? Who made you do this to us? What horrible things happened in your childhood that made you think this was a competent design choice? Were you in a coma and you just woke up and you thought it was still 2008? What happened? Why? I just... So let's talk about the dungeons. I'm going to go through them in the intended order. So starting with the Zoras. So first, you go onto this path, and Sidon pops up, and he's like, hey, bro, follow me up this path, and we can, fight monsters together. I mean, you'll do all the fighting, and I'll just, swim, but come on. And then you do that, and then after a while, you're still going down the path, fighting monsters, and he's like, hey, good job fighting those monsters. Let's go. And then he pops up a third time when you're even closer, and then you finally get past all the monsters, and you get to the village, and you have to sit through 30 minutes of cutscenes where they explain how Mipha wanted to marry Link, because we didn't already explore that plot line in Ocarina, but everyone else was not into the whole interracial marriage thing, and some of them are just flat out mad at you that Mipha died because she died because you weren't able to kill Ganon. And there's this whole ridiculous drama where her brother gives you this shirt that she made for you, which apparently was supposed to be an engagement gift. And that convinces the other fish people to stop being angry at you, and like it's just like some Telemundo soap opera bullshit. I don't understand. But anyway, this shirt gives you the ability to shoot up waterfalls, so that's cool, I guess. Then you have to go up a waterfall to fight a Lionel and collect all of the lightning arrows from him, so that you can fight the boss. And then you get the lightning arrows and you go down to Sidon, and he becomes a speedboat. I have no idea how or why, but he becomes a speedboat. And so he speedboats you around the elephant, and you have to hit his weak points while dodging the ice. And you use your ice power to break the ice. And that's it. Once you hit all 4 of the weak points, the boss opens up and you can go in. And when you go into the dungeon, first a few scenes play, cutscenes and stuff. You can skip them all, but they're there, and there's a lot of them. And the very first thing that happens is the spirit of Mipha appears to you and says, "Hey, go get the map." And so you go get the map. And then you get the map, and it shows you the whole elephant, and it shows you what, and it has these glowing red dots. And you're like, I guess those are objective points of some kind. And then Mipha appears and is like, "Hey, those objective points, I need you to walk up to them and press the A button to interact with your SHEIKAH slate." I'm like, okay. So I do that. And then there's like 5 of them. So I go up to the first one and I press the thing, and then it turns blue, which means it's not evil anymore because we're in fucking crisis or whatever. Or Tron, I guess. Like seriously, it's ridiculous. Everything is neon orange when it's bad and neon blue when it's good. And why? Who picked that design aesthetic? It's so shit looking. Like, what happened to The Legend of Zelda where we can have like unique and interesting dungeons that evoke the environment they're supposed to be set in instead of just being a fucking glowing robot? Like, fuck. Anyway. So you interact with the first thing, and then Mipha pops up and he's like, "Great, now you've only got 4 more to go." And then I'm like, "Yeah, I can see how many are left. Thanks. Don't do that again." But she does it again every time you interact with one of the things. Then once you've interacted with all of them, a bigger glowing red dot appears where the boss is, and you go there to fight the boss. I should take some time to explain what the dungeons are like on the inside. First of all, there are no enemies. There are piles of black goop that have eyeballs attached to them, and if you shoot the eyeballs, they die. Some of these goop piles spit out floating skeleton heads, but the skeleton heads don't really do anything, and they die with 1 arrow shot of any power, so I can't really call them enemies. And that's it. That's the only gate to your progress. There's a couple of puzzles. Honestly, the puzzles in this area are probably the most advanced, except for in the camel, but that's not saying much. They're really fucking basic puzzles. I mean, it's an elephant that constantly spews water, and there's a water wheel, so you do the math, right? And the way that you make the water go into the water wheel is you pause the game, move the elephant's trunk, then unpause the game, wait through an animation while the elephant's trunk moves, and then rinse and repeat until you're done. Yeah, seriously. So, the keen-eyed among you may... I suppose keen-eyed is the wrong word. The long-living among you may remember that that mechanic was in Ocarina of Time, where you had to equip and unequip the hover boots and iron boots whenever you wanted to use them for puzzle solving. And this pausing the game to switch mechanic was the primary reason that everyone hated the water temple, because you had to switch your iron boots on and off so much. It was insane. Well, funny story that in future games where they used the iron boots, they made it a quick select item, so you wouldn't have to open your menu to switch. And even in the remakes, they decided to keep that change so you wouldn't have to do that, and those levels could be more fun. But for whatever reason, in this game, every single dungeon is like that. And you may have to switch the orientation of the dungeon 20 times. You know? I mean, the optimal route probably involves a lot less than that, but you're not going to play optimally your first time through it. So, congrats. Yeah, it's very annoying and dumb, and should not have been done that way. And I think the only reason it was done that way is because Nintendo is stupid and wanted to sell new consoles. So obviously, Breath of the Wild was originally being developed for the Wii U, which had, the whole gamepad screen. And in theory, they could have had it so that the main screen handles the game, and the gamepad screen handles your map, which is a thing they've done with a bunch of Zelda titles that got ported to Wii U. And so, so you could have had this dungeon rearranging mechanic being done in real time as you're walking around the dungeon. And that could have been cool. That is not what happened. Instead, the game had to come out for both Wii U and Switch, and the Wii U version could not be superior in any way, as per Nintendo's mandate, so all gamepad features were cut. This could possibly have also addressed some issues with the difficulty. For example, having dozens of healing items isn't that much of an advantage if you don't have the time to use them, because you can't pause, and you have to, play out a long eating animation, right? The Monster Hunter system, or the Dark Souls system even. But alas, you can auto-pause. You can pause the game at any time. You can pause in the middle of getting hit by an attack while your character is about to start ragdolling. You can't pause while you're actually in the ragdoll animation. But right before it and right after it, yes. And you can heal. You can even teleport away if you don't want to heal and you just want to get out of there. So, nice. But yeah, that's like the one thing where I think the switch from Wii U probably hurt the game is the dungeons, where there's, you just have to pause and unpause and pause and unpause and pause and unpause dozens of times in every dungeon. So it's very dumb and boring, and I hate it. Right. So next, the Goron dungeon. So I suppose I should mention how the boss fight goes. So in each area, the boss fight uses, I think, is supposed to use one of your core rune powers, so that you have to use that rune to stop it. But it's not super clear. So in In this area, the boss will generate cubes of ice, which you can break with your ice power, and that's it. And then this is actually the only boss that killed me on my first round, because when you get it down to half health, it fills up the room with water and creates platforms, 4 platforms in a square formation that you have to swim to. But when it did that, I was out of stamina from smacking it repeatedly, and I happened to be standing in one of the places that did not have a platform and thus was water. And if you are swimming and run out of stamina, you just get a game over. So I just got a game over from that. I mean, the second time around I saw that coming and it didn't get me, but that was my one death to a boss fight in the entire history of me playing this game. And like I said, I completed it twice, and I've picked it up for brief periods a couple of other times to see if I still feel the same way about it. And I do. And I'm going to have to play it again after I record this video so I can have footage to show alongside my words. Fun. Yeah. But anyway, the boss basically just has a big spear and he pokes you with it if you're not careful, but you can just smack him, so whatever. Moving on to the second dungeon. So this time, like I said, you have to talk to a specific NPC who will sell you the potion. Technically, if you know how to make the potion, you can make it using ingredients you collect elsewhere in the world, but the best place to get those ingredients is up the mountain, where you will burst into flames if you don't have them. So, and you wouldn't know how to make the potion without, having seen the ingredients list from a walkthrough or something. So basically you have to talk to this NPC, which you also wouldn't know to do unless you went to a walkthrough. It's very weird. I don't know why it's laid out like this. And I think it's laid out like this because they expect you to go through the game riding your horse and going from one location to another along the roads. But so much of the marketing around this game was about going off-road, so it's weird if that's the case. But it seems like that's the case because there's this whole horse mechanic and all these stables, and you can warp to a stable and pick up your horse and ride to along the roads, and your horses are only good on the roads. So it's like there's a bunch of systems that try to reinforce traveling down these specified paths, but there's a whole bunch of other systems that completely undercut that and tell you to do the opposite. And I don't know which one you actually want from me, game. But whatever. So you go through this area, and you drink your potion, and you go up to the top, and you get to the Goron city. You buy some Goron armor so you don't need the potions anymore. And then you go down the path to get Daruk's grandson or whatever, so that you can escort him up the mountain. You have to rescue him because he got trapped in a cave. He's a Goron, and he just got stuck behind some rocks because he couldn't eat them or punch his way out of them or anything. He's not a rock monster who eats rocks. So whatever. Then you meet this guy, and you realize that not only is he a rock monster who eats rocks, he's also got an invincible shield that he can put up at any time and keep up forever with no penalty. But he's constantly afraid? What? How can you be afraid if you're invincible? What are you... Who wrote this character? Where is your brain? Whatever. Anyway, so you have to lead him up the mountain. There's a bunch of enemies in your way. There's some floating, like, light bulbs, I guess. Like, they look like they're made out of the same shit as the Guardians, but they're just spotlights with helicopter propellers. That's it. They don't attack or anything, but if you step into their light at all, then it makes the big lizard mad and he stomps and a bunch of rocks fall down on you. Which would be fine if you could get past those rocks or find cover or something, but your invincible companion, who isn't just invincible by game logic, but in real world is invincible, is scared and hides at the nearest spot behind where you accidentally stepped into the light, so that you have to redo that section. And so that you can't move forward despite the rocks falling, and so that you can't gain any progress. You just have to wait for his dumb ass. You do have the ability to use your horse whistle to call him, but he doesn't move very quickly. And if you do try to time, his movement so that you can get past the spotlights, good luck, because he'll just wait for 10 seconds after you call him and then start walking forward as soon as the light appears in front of him, because fuck you. And then when the rocks start falling down, he'll just bolt backwards instead of forwards, even though he's invincible, because fuck you. And in order to make the lizard weak, you have to walk this guy up to some cannons, put him into the cannon holster, and then drop a bomb in there and just cannonball him into the weak spots. So you have to do that 4 times while guarding him and escorting him through these areas. But he's invincible, and the rocks falling down hurt you. And he refuses to acknowledge his invincibility and move forward, because fuck you. Why would you play a Zelda game if you expected to have fun? Come on. Seriously, get with the program. So you get through all of that. And then you go into this dude, this lizard guy, and his gimmick is that he can be upright or rotated 90 degrees to one side. And that's it. And you have to switch back and forth between those positions like 20 times. There's no puzzles. There's no enemies. There's a couple things you have to burn. And a couple more of those goop things you have to shoot. But that's it. It's just, if he's on his right side, then you can access these checkpoints. And if it's on its... and if it's right side up, then you can access these checkpoints. And then you have to switch back and forth to activate these checkpoints. And that's it. That's the entire fucking dungeon. It's one room, no puzzles, no locked doors, no enemies. Can you imagine if they did that in Zelda 1? Can you imagine if any previous Zelda game had a room like this, where it's just one empty room, and you just have to walk around the edges, activating fucking checkpoints until the boss shows up? It's so dumb. It's so bad. Can you imagine any game doing that? Being that pathetic? This one is. Oh, man. Okay. Alright, so you finish that, and then you go up and fight the boss. And at first, you just fight him normally. You know, you just beat the shit out of him until his health gets down far enough, and then he goes into phase 2. And in phase 2, he charges up this huge fireball and then chucks it at you. And it moves so slowly, you would literally have to try to get hit by it. My first time fighting this boss, I avoided that attack for a solid 30 minutes because I couldn't figure out how to damage him. Because he's invincible in this stage unless you do the one thing that damages him, which is throwing a bomb while he's charging up the thing. Now I know you might think that should be obvious. They do King Dodongo in every fucking game, right? But he doesn't look like King Dodongo, and his fire charge attack doesn't look like it's sucking in air or anything. It just looks like he's charging up a fireball. Like, you know, it doesn't look like the kind of thing where you would throw a bomb into it. And also, your bombs don't react on a timer the way they used to. And they don't react when they hit fire and automatically blow up like they used to. So you don't really associate with bombs as being the counter to a fire thing, you know? Or at least I didn't. And also, the bombs are pretty much useless in combat because they do so little damage. Like a base level bokoblin can survive like 10 bombs. So I just never used them for combat. I used them to solve the puzzles where they're obviously required, and that was it. And nothing about this area had made me think, yeah, this dude's definitely going to be King Dodongo again, because that's the height of creativity, I guess. I don't know. So you beat him like you beat King Dodongo. Boring, dumb, uninteresting. Move on. Then you get to the bird area. I already described how you get here. You literally just walk into the town, talk to the mayor. He tells you to go talk to this other guy across the snowy area. You go to him, you complete an archery minigame, he gives you the bombs, and he takes you to the special area where you have infinite flight power so that you can fly around the bird and shoot all of its weak points with bomb arrows. It's completely disconnected from everything else in the game. The mechanics are completely different than anything else in the game. You have infinite stamina. Your stamina automatically restores whenever you switch between aiming and flying, and you can just fly infinitely. It's so stupid. So anyway, you trigger those 4 things, then you go in. Of course, this time Rivali is talking to you as you trigger your things instead of Mifa or Daruk from the previous ones. So the gimmick in this is it's a bird, and it can tilt its wings to be straight horizontal, or it can tilt, like 30 degrees left or 30 degrees right. And so basically, you have to go all the way down the length of each wing to activate some things. There's a couple more of the goopy eyeball monsters. There's one room that actually has an enemy in it. And that's it. It's just block pushing puzzles where you push the blocks by tilting the environment. And yeah. And then you get to the end, and you fight the boss. And the boss is weird. Like, it's the same as all the others until phase 2. But then in phase 2, it starts throwing a bunch of tornadoes at you and, like, warping around. And I think you're supposed to use stasis on it to, like, stop the tornadoes or something, because each of the other areas requires you to use one of your runes. So by process of elimination, this one should too. But stasis isn't really associated with wind anywhere else in the game. and there's nothing about this boss's design that indicates you should be making him stop dead, and I beat him without using that power, so I'm not sure if it's actually supposed to be used or not. But yeah, there you go. He's very basic and uninteresting. There's just a bunch of tornadoes around, and you hit him a bunch. That's it. And then the last dungeon. Okay, so first you go into the desert. All right, and in the middle of the desert, there's this oasis. Cool. Then you go past the oasis, and you get up to the Gerudo town. And there's a shrine nearby, so you can warp to and fro. Nice. And you can't get into the town because no men allowed. Okay. I'm the hero of Hyrule, but whatever. No men allowed. Cool. So then you talk to some people around the outside of the town, and one of them tells you, hey, there's this weirdo, like, transvestite dude in the oasis who might be able to help you. And so you go back to the oasis and climb up this rock at night and talk to this dude, and he gives you an outfit like his, and then you can walk in there and no one thinks anything of it because, you know, this sheer thin desert material is totally going to make it look like you have tits. Whatever. Honestly, I think the SHEIKAH outfit looks way more feminine, but whatever, who cares? Then you go to talk to the little girl who's in charge of the village, which isn't super easy. And then she tells you, hey, go over yonder to the ninja hideout and take the helm that they stole from me, and then I can help you. And I'm like, sure, it's not like you have a fucking army or anything. So I go to the ninja hideout. And on my way up, like, this is not the first time you encounter these ninjas. They appear at random places throughout the game. So on your way up, a bunch of ninjas are attacking you. And you attack them. And it's fine. They're just normal enemies. You kill them. Then you get inside the ninja tower. And for some reason, when you're inside the ninja tower, these enemies can auto-kill you. But only sometimes. The big ones with the Nodachi thing can one-shot you if they do a charge attack. And the other ones can't. And by the way, when I say they can one-shot you, I mean no matter what. You can have a full stock of fairies. You can have the best armor in the game. You can have maxed out health. You can have every possible advantage. You can have Mipha's Grace. Everything. You still die. You still see the game over screen. You still go back to the beginning of the area and everything resets. Because fuck you. Fuck your reliance on the mechanics we've had for hundreds of hours so far. Fuck you. You're doing the stealth game. We're going to completely ignore all of our established rules and resources, and we don't give a shit if it's fun or not. This is the story we're telling. Fuck you. And you know what? If it was a story-driven game, I might understand that philosophy a little bit. But it's not. So what the fuck? So you have to get through this area by climbing to the top of the cave and throwing bananas to distract the stupid buff heads. And then you get to the end, and there's an empty room with some treasure chests in it. And you open the treasure chest, and you don't have your thing. And you think, alright, what the fuck? Is this not the room I'm supposed to be in? Is there somewhere else? Is this just like a side area? What the fuck? So you leave, and you go explore, and, you know, you kill every single fucking ninja dude without letting them touch you, so that you can run around and explore every inch of this place, and you don't see anything. There's no helm, there's no boss, there's nothing. There's just, what the fuck? So then, you go back to that big room with the treasure chests, and you start looking around again, and you think, oh, there's got to be something here. And you see a treasure chest poking out of the dirt, and you think, okay, I guess I can dig that up with magnesis. It's something. Maybe that's it. And then at this point, once you've got magnesis on, you can see that there's a panel of the wall that has metal in it and therefore can be manipulated. It doesn't look like it has metal in it. It looks like every other part of the wall. There's literally no visual indication whatsoever that this chunk of wall is special. But it is, so you rotate it, and then you go into a boss fight. I use those words with the utmost leniency because all you do is shoot him like 6 times, and he drops his own bombs on his head every time you shoot him, and then you win. That's it. At the end, you have to use magnesis on the big bomb instead of shooting him. That's it. It's so pathetic. Then you get the helm. You warp your ass back to the Gerudo village because fuck walking. And then you have to start a sledding minigame where a seal pulls you along a shield through the sand. What's-her-face wears the helmet and, creates an area of lightning protection around her as you sail through or sled through the lightning storm that surrounds the big monster. And you have to shoot its feet with bomb arrows, but they don't provide you with any this time. You just have to do it. The problem is, her seal moves at a different speed than yours. Faster than the default speed of your seal, but slower than the running speed of your seal. Because fuck you. We're going to do everything wrong we possibly can about this. Fuck you. How dare you play this game and want to have any fun with it? Go fucking die. That seems to be their design philosophy. So you finally shoot out all the legs, and you get up onto the camel. The camel is actually the best dungeon in the entire game, because it has more than one room, and there are actual puzzles and keys and stuff. One of the rooms even has enemies in it. They're not good enemies, and they don't even have weapons, but, it's something. Every time you interact with one of the pedestals, Urbosa will pop up and be like, hey, there's only this many left, because you didn't fucking know that just by seeing the map or the mini map or having a brain. Nah, we gotta remind you every time. Cool. And then you complete all the little things, and you get to the end, and you fight the boss. And the boss is weird, because unlike the other ones, he's not a big, slow dumbass you shoot arrows at until he falls down. He's just fast. And he just, teleports around and then slams into you. So what you gotta do is hold up your shield, or if you have the patch version, do a shield block thing. I want to say parry, but it's not really a parry. You just have to bring up your shield with the perfect timing, and it has to be a non-electric shield. And then when he hits your shield, his sword will bounce off of it, and he'll freeze in his tracks. And then you hit him. And that's phase 1. And then once you get his health down to half, in phase 2, he drops metallic rods on the ground, and then shocks them with lightning. And you have to not get shocked by them. Now, I assumed that during this phase, you would, shoot him with arrows or something, because all of the others had a phase where you shot them with arrows, and because, what the fuck else would you do? But no, apparently the answer is make him shock himself with his own lightning by using magnesis to bring one of the lightning rods to him. Because sure, it makes sense that he would shock himself with his own lightning. Also, the entire room we're in is made of metal, but the game just kind of ignores that for the purposes of this fight, so whatever. And then after he shocks himself, you can go hit him. And then that's the fight. After you complete each dungeon, you get a special power-up that you can use only in the overworld, not shrines or dungeons. You can't really trigger when they activate because they activate during other regular actions. They activate a limited number of times, and they have a cooldown after you've used all of their charges before you can use any of them again. But the cooldown only starts after all the charges are expended. So yeah. When you rescue Mipha, you get Mipha's Grace, which is basically just a fairy plus 4 temporary HP, and that resets every like 20 minutes, I think. When you rescue Daruk, you get Daruk's Protection, which 3 times while you're blocking, you don't just block, you're invincible. But, you know, after you get hit 3 times, it goes away. And that's it. And if you only get hit twice, then, you know, you can wait, you know, an hour, and those other charges won't come back. You have to get hit all 3 times until it goes away, and then it'll recharge after, I think, 16 minutes or something. Then you have Rivali's Wind when you rescue Rivali, and this one is actually kind of useful. So basically you hold down your jump button to charge it up for a minute, and then you shoot into the air like 30 feet or more, probably more than that. And then you can like glide down from there, so you don't have to climb, or you can skip a certain amount of climbing using this power, which is cool. But again, it has 3 charges, and if you don't use them all, then you have to, you know, wait, right? Like the timer only starts after you've used all of them. So get fucked. And then there's Urbosa's Fury when you rescue Urbosa from the camel. And her attack is when you do a charge strike, it'll just also make this huge ball, like AoE lightning effect appear around you. And again, 3 charges, and again, you have to use all of them before the recharge counter will start. And yeah, super duper, yeah, that's what we needed in Zelda. Fucking World of Warcraft-esque spell recharges that, you know, work worse than that. Why? Why is this here? Ugh. So, yeah, that's what you get instead of dungeon items. You get really shitty abilities that, you know, have cooldowns of the worst possible kind. And really long cooldowns too, so you can't ever, like, become reliant on them, because, you know, once you use them all up, you have to wait 30 minutes. You know, it's dumb. It's really dumb. And, you know, you may have, you know, a battle where you need 2, right? You need to use Urbosa's Fury twice. And then you can get into another battle, like 20 minutes later, where you need to use Urbosa's Fury twice again. But you can't use it twice, because it only has 3 charges, and you didn't use all 3 of them before, so you don't have any of them now. You only have the one, and then you use that one, so now the counter starts. Fuck you. It's stupid, and I hate it. Each one of them also gives you a heart container, which is cool, I guess. You can have 30 hearts in this game instead of 20, because, you know, the game wasn't easy enough with that defense system. We needed to just crank the health bar. Yeah. And that's it. I guess I should talk about Hyrule Castle. Hyrule Castle is the only well-designed dungeon in the entire fucking game. And it's not even really a dungeon. So, the way Hyrule Castle works is there's a castle, right? And it's in the middle of Hyrule, right? And it used to be where Zelda and her family lived, right? But then Ganon took it over and covered it with black goop and made all of the Guardian sentries turn into evil murder bots that hate you. And then filled it up with monsters. And so you have to go through all these monsters and get past all these murder bots and, you know, find your way to Ganon. And that's it. It's just a big area with a bunch of interconnected rooms and some unique puzzles on how to get between those rooms and a bunch of cool shit to interact with. There's a bunch of enemies and a bunch of eyeball goops and a bunch of areas you can climb, and it's just a well-designed, fun area to explore. There's a basement area that acts as like a secondary sub-dungeon, leads up to a fight with a skeletal Hinox, a Stalnox, if you will, which guards the Hylian shield, which is the best shield in the game, but still breaks, because fuck you. And yeah, it's just a cool dungeon. Or it would be if you had to actually go through any of it. Because that's the problem. See, even if you haven't played any of the game, there are two ways you can get through this area without exploring any of the castle. Oh, the castle is also full of cool lore books that like have Zelda's diary and stuff like that, which is neat, but whatever. So there are two ways that you can get through the castle without doing any of that cool shit. So the first is you can walk through the front fucking door and up the main path. Now this takes you through 3 different towers that have gauntlets, and I say tower, but you don't actually go up the tower, you just go through the middle of them, and then the doors close around you, and then there's an enemy encounter inside. But you can also go around the tower, and then that doesn't happen. So yeah. The second option is you can just climb shit until you bypass all that stuff. They kind of try to mitigate this by putting up a bunch of eyeball goop and some guardians, but there are still places where you can climb pretty safely, so yeah. And then the third option, if you played through at least the introduction to the fish level, is that you can just use the power of Mipha's sweater to like climb the waterfalls and be at the front door of the castle instantaneously. And if you follow any of these methods, then you go directly to Ganon's room without exploring any of the castle. In fact, you can't get to Ganon's room by exploring the parts of the castle that are a well-designed dungeon. Because, you know, why would we commit to making a good dungeon in a Zelda game when we could just, you know, undercut that for speedrunning memes? Why? Why? Ugh. Whatever. Let's talk about Ganon. Sorry, if my voice seems to be going, it's because I've been talking for like 2 hours straight, so whatever. So the fight with Ganon goes thusly. If you haven't beaten the dungeons, then all of the bosses from the dungeons are there with Ganon and try to hit you alongside him. but you can kind of just ignore them and hit him instead. If you have beat the dungeons, then not only are those extra bosses not there, but Ganon gets a hearty amount of his health reduced right off the bat because he gets attacked by the Guardians in a big cutscene. So that's a pretty big fucking gap in difficulty. And, you know, it's kind of like your reward for playing the game is getting a worse boss fight. So, fuck you. Fuck you for having fun. Fuck you for playing the game. Here's your shitty boss fight. So, you play through that. And he kind of uses all the abilities of the other guys. Mostly he just uses the invincibility power from the red one. And you just kind of have to wait through it or hit him with the Master Sword, one or the other. And you get to the end of that. And then you're magically teleported outside to a part of the game that does not exist in the regular map. I guarantee it. There's just not an area in the game that is like this. Cool. But anyway, you're there. And Ganon is there as a giant pig monster. And then a horse appears next to you, and you get to ride it, even if you don't have a horse. And then a bunch of glowing weak points appear all over Ganon, and you get to shoot him with infinite light arrows that Zelda just gives to you right then. Because, fuck it, who cares about, building on all of the stuff you've learned throughout the game when we could just have a dumb set piece that is not even remotely challenging and serves no purpose. And then you hit all the glowing weak points, and then he dies. And that's it. That's the end of the game. That's it. Ugh. So bad. Okay. There are some worthwhile things about this game. There's some interesting areas to explore. The Lost Woods has a cool mechanic where you hold up a torch and watch which way the torch tilts to tell you your correct path, and that's kind of cool. There's this one island called Eventide Isle where you lose all of your shit when you go there, so you have to try not to get one shot again as if it was the beginning of the game. That's the only interesting thing about it, is trying desperately not to get one shot. Otherwise it's a pretty generic samey part of the game. There's a hot springs you can chill out in and talk to some Goros. That's fun, I guess. There's a little side quest where you can buy a house and build a town and, color your outfits and stuff. It's whatever. But there's also a lot of really, really just atrociously bad shit. So I'm going to recount for you the worst shrine in the entire game. And that is an impressive feat, let me tell you. So, you're in the desert, right? You're exploring around the desert, and a little ways off the beaten path, you find a shrine. So you walk up to it, and there's some drunk bitch hanging over the shrine pedestal so you can't activate it. And you're like, hey, can you move? And she says, I need something to drink. And I'm like, okay, whatever, I can go get you something to drink. I got some potions. I got a heat resist potion. You want that? No, go to the bar, get me a drink. Okay, whatever, fuck it. So you go to the bar. And you go to the bar and you get this chick a drink. And the chick at the bar is like, yeah, I can make her a drink, but I need ice. I'm like, okay. First of all, no, you don't need ice. Ice is a luxury in your drink. just get the bitch a fucking canteen of water or some shit. Second of all, if you do need ice, I got ice. I got an ice rune, an ice sword, an ice arrow, an ice spear, an ice greatsword, and an ice rod. All ready at your disposal to make as much ice as you want. There's a fountain outside. Let's do this shit. She's like, no, none of that's good enough. You gotta go across the desert. Bring me a block of ice from the ice freezer across the desert. Bring it back here. You want me to carry ice across the desert? Yeah, and the chick who sells the ice is only awake during the day, so you can't do it at night. You want me to transport ice across the desert during the day? Are you insane? I can make infinite ice. I have a tool for that I was given in the tutorial level, and I have always had access to it. What is your deal? So whatever. Go across the desert to get the ice. On my way across the desert, I see a bunch of enemies. And I think, man, fighting a bunch of enemies while carrying this ice is probably going to be a giant pain in the dick. That's probably why they set it up this way. So let me kill all these enemies on my way over there, so I won't have to deal with them once I have the ice. So then I go talk to the chick. So I kill all the enemies, and I talk to the chick who has the ice, and I get the ice. And as I thought, it's a big-ass block of ice that you can't just put in your inventory with your swords and shields and everything. You have to carry it over your head. So, I walk back across the desert, confident that I have killed all the enemies and will not have to worry about them. And then I get shot by an enemy, because they respawned. All of them respawned. I haven't mentioned the spawn mechanic up until this point, but in this game, enemies stay dead until an event called the Blood Moon happens. And it happens roughly every 3 or 4 in-game hours. But basically, all of the enemies, no matter where they were in the game world, stay dead until that point. If you cleared out an area, that area is cleared out. Nothing comes back until that event. And then they come back during that event. And then you can kill them again. So, in this one moment during the middle of the day, solely for the purpose of fucking me over during this quest, they made enemies that respawn. But despite the complete bullshit, the fact that they completely ignored all the rules and just made this whole thing to fuck me over without thinking about the gameplay aspect or how stupid it is that I can't just use my ice power for this, I make it past the enemies, I take the ice to the chick at the bar, and I hand it to her. And the chick at the bar says, "Alright, I got her drink. Go tell her she can come over here." I say, wait. You're not even going to make me take it to her? You're not even going to give it to me so that I can hand it to her? She could have just left at any time? So you go walk over to the bitch who's hanging over your pedestal, stopping you from activating your shrine. And you talk to her, and you say, "Hey, chick at the bar says you got a drink waiting for you." And she gets up and fucking sprints like a goddamn fucking triathlete on cocaine. Like just whoosh. Like, Jesus fucking Christ. Fine. So after all that bullshit, all of that shit where the game completely ignored its own rules and fucked me over, I activate the shrine. And it's a shrine of combat. Jesus fucking Christ. Like I said, there are some cool things in the game. You know, the mazes are particularly interesting. You know, there's some cool stuff. But this This is more the tone that the game goes for most of the time. And this is horseshit being shoveled down your throat with maximum force. And I hate it. I hate everything about it. This is their design philosophy. We don't care about you. We don't care about you having fun. We don't care about the systems we've established. We don't care about what makes sense to the player. We just want to fuck you. So we're going to fuck you. That is the underlying game design, from what I can tell. And I hate it. There are other things to talk about in this game. There's a lot of other things, actually. You know, I could talk at great length about the armor upgrade system, the fairies, I could talk about the memory system and the plot, because there is a plot. The plot is basically 100 years ago, the world was way more interesting and the characters actually had personality and there could have been a Zelda game, but we decided not to show you that and give you this shit instead. And every time I saw the plot, I was just like, man, that shit from the past looks interesting. You know, Link and Zelda and a handful of colorful characters hanging out, doing fun stuff, you know, solving puzzles and shit. That'd be, man, that'd almost be a Zelda game. Could I play that instead? And they're like, no, fuck you. We're gonna make a Hyrule Warriors sequel in 4 years. And then that's what it's gonna be. You know, not a Zelda game. We don't make Zelda games anymore. Fuck you. You know, I could talk about the money system, where you never find rupees in the overworld at all. Sometimes they're in treasure chests, but mostly you just beat the shit out of the rock monsters until they die and drop a bunch of gemstones. And then you can sell those gemstones for like 500 rupees each and just always have more rupees than you ever know what to do with. And every 3 hours you go kill those rock monsters again, so you can always have an infinite amount of money on hand. Because there's no limit to your wallet size. And money means nothing. And the only thing you ever spend it on is arrows. I literally had more than 50 of each kind of arrow at all times. And if I ever dropped close to 50, I was like, ooh, I better stop using that arrow type. I'm running a little low on it. I'll go buy some more next time I have the chance. There's a place where you can go turn chunks of scrap from guardian monsters into weapons, specifically designed for fighting guardian monsters. And when you do this, you can build a bow and arrow, and the arrows one-shot the guardians if you hit them in the eye. And that's not hard to do. And so you one-shot the guardians and then collect a bunch of scrap from them and then go make some more arrows, rinse and repeat, till you have an infinite supply. And yeah. So that's cool. You know, I could talk about the mechanic where you're supposed to take a blue flame from this furnace up to this house by carrying it through these torches, but then it starts to rain while you're doing that. And so you have to just stop and wait for the rain and then relight your torch and then go on. Because fuck you. You know? I could talk about the cool, environments where you can go and see these dragons flying around and get their scales and open up shrines that are just a shrine of blessing. Nothing interesting. No cool new items. Nothing worthwhile. Just, that. I could talk about the cool cave you can glide down into that's got goddess statues on either side, and as you glide in, there's hundreds of fucking guardians, eyeballing you as you fly through. And, if you time it right, then you just barely escape them as you glide in. And then you get to the end and there's a shrine and you think, holy shit, this might be an actual like dungeon type thing. And no, it's just a shrine of blessing. Fuck you. We built this hype-ass environment and made it full of cool shit and made it like a big set piece that you can go through and made it look like an ancient forgotten temple, and it's just a shrine, just a regular shrine. I could talk about all the places in the game where there are shrines hidden underground so you can't see them, and you just have to like poke around and hope that the beeping is leading you in the correct direction. I could talk about all the shrines where this weird bird guy shows up and plays music and is like, oh, here's the riddle to solve the shrine, but it's never really like that riddly. It's just sometimes a bit finicky in the execution. And then you get a shrine of blessing. I don't know. There's nothing about the game that's like good. The combat is shit. The story is, hey, look at all the cool shit you could have done instead of this. The minute to minute gameplay is shit. The core gameplay loop of climbing and gliding is pretty fun, but you can't do that in shrines because fuck you. Or dungeons, because dungeons are made out of the same thing as shrines. All of the shrines are just this shitty, fluorescent lights poking out under black metal bullshit that's just like gross and not fun to look at and not unique or interesting in any way. And they're all like that. All 124 of them. Is if you count the dungeons, which are the same. And come on, guys, like, this is Zelda. Zelda's a series which is known for making every area feel unique and vibrant and alive. And there's no mini games for like pieces of heart or anything, because there are no pieces of heart. There's just the spirit orbs or spirit vessel, whatever. And you get 4 of them and you can either improve your stamina or your health. And if you choose the wrong one, then you can switch it back with this weird statue in this other town. And that's it. That's the whole system. I don't know. It's just, I don't know. It's just bad. It's just uninspired and undercutting itself at every turn. There's so many parts of the game where it's just like, yeah, we had a cool idea for a fun thing to do. So, this area is constantly raining, and you have to carry a bunch of colored orbs into the specific platforms. Oh, and you have to do it while going up these objects that you can't climb because you're carrying an orb. And there are a bunch of enemies nearby who shoot lightning at you, and lightning does huge AoEs when you're in water, like you are when it's raining. So have fun with that. And I did not have fun with that. It was not fun. It was tedious and boring, and I had to trudge up a lot of ground and fucking toss the orb and then trudge up and then toss the orb, and you can't climb anyway because it's fucking raining, and it's just like, oh yeah, we're at the edge of this, beach, and there's this big ass spiral thing, and you're gonna go down the path carrying an orb to get to the thing, and you have to go down the path, and we're gonna put a bunch of monsters down the path for you to avoid, right? And so it'll be cool, and there'll still be rain and lightning and stuff, because fuck you. And I guess it's a cool set piece, but it's not fun. It's very tedious and boring. I have to keep dropping the orb so I can fight. And why are these orbs not able to be affected by magnesis? Would that have just made the game too easy? Is that why? Because they're clearly made of metal. You just decided they don't count because fuck me, I guess. And it's just like the whole game is like that. Like, you have a clear system in place. You could do things by your existing system and make a fun experience, but you instead decide that telling the player to fuck off is more important. And I don't know why. You spent so much time on these shitty crafting systems when you could have just built some more interesting enemies. And some people want me to talk about how, but you can fight without your regular weapon stuff and make things more interesting. Like, not really. Like, the most you can do is throw a bomb at an explosive barrel and, hope that they die from that. That's about it. I mean, you can whack them with a metal object, but it doesn't do that much damage. And, eventually you're still going to resort to hitting them with your sword. So, And honestly, I don't care. I don't want to fight the same 12 bokoblins over and over and over again. Every time I run up to an enemy encampment, it's just like, oh, here's 4 bokoblins and 1 extra strong bokoblin. How will you deal with this? I don't know, I guess the same way I dealt with it the last 70 fucking times. It doesn't fucking matter. It's not fun to try and go at each battle differently each time. You're always going to try and optimize it, and the optimal way is to just hit them with your sword. So the fact that early on you can avoid the boring combat doesn't really stop the combat from being boring, and it isn't really a point in the game's favor that you can ignore the boring combat for a little bit until that part gets boring too, and then you might as well just do the boring combat. Ultimately, there's nothing really good about this game except the art. The art is amazing. But nothing that matters, and nothing that makes it feel like Zelda, right? Like, there are Rito and Zora and all that cool stuff, but how? How are they both Rito and Zora? The Rito evolved from the Zora because reasons. But how are they both now? And the Gerudo, didn't they, die off after the whole, war thing? Didn't that happen? What's this shit? And the Kokiri are here, but or the Koroks are here, rather, but how? How are they here at the same time as the Gerudo? That makes no sense. And it's not like any of these things look recognizable anyway. I mean, the Koroks look pretty similar, I guess, but that's it. If you showed me the designs for these Zora, before the game came out and said, what do these look like to you? I'd be like, generic fish people from some weird RPG thing. They're pretty cool looking, I guess, but they could go to anything. I don't know. They don't look like Zora. They look like generic fish people. And I mean, it's a cool design, and I hope they keep it, but it doesn't remind me of previous iterations of the design, The same thing for the Rito. They look nothing like they did in Wind Waker. Nothing like that. And I mean, it's a cool race of bird people. I'd be totally down to see these dudes as a playable race in any random RPG game. But it has nothing to do with Zelda. And all of the things that you've come to expect from The Legend of Zelda just aren't here. You can't roll, you can't find hearts or rupees in the environment, you can't even really cut grass with your sword because your sword has durability. You can't play any musical instruments. What the fuck is that? How you make a Zelda game with no musical instruments? Hell, there's not even any background music. In certain locations, there's a few tracks from Ocarina, but otherwise it's all just environmental sounds, which is dumb. Not what I come to Zelda for. You know? And like, there was, in previous Zelda games, all of them, basically, since Link to the Past, really, have had this dichotomy, right? Where there's like a dramatic shift in the game that you can trigger, right? Half the time you're in the light world and the other half you're in the dark world. Or sometimes you're human and sometimes you're wolf. Or sometimes you're in the past, sometimes you're in the future. Sometimes you're a human or Goron or a Zora or Deku, right? And and all of them to a certain extent have that, right? Like in Skyward Sword, there's a huge difference between soaring through the sky and exploring the land, and in Wind Waker, there's a huge difference between sailing and exploring the land. Basically every previous Zelda game has had this dramatic like gameplay shift dichotomy as like a core element. Past and future is, different gameplay modes entirely sometimes with human and a different transformation, things like that. And Breath of the Wild doesn't have anything like that. I don't know, maybe you could say the shrines are different because they turn off your climbing mechanic, but that's not different in a good way. And that's the only mechanic they turn off. So, well, also your champion abilities, you don't get to use those. But you can turn those off on your own by preference. So, we just threw out all the core fundamental things that we've established as being part of the Zelda franchise. There's no music, no rolling, no dungeons to explore, no unique cool enemies to fight. Just like generic boring element variations. No Dekubabas, no Skulltulas, no Dark Nuts, no I could literally list Zelda enemies for days, and there's just nothing here. No P-hats, no wraps, no ropes, no keys, no, actually there are keys. Sorry, I misspoke. There are keys, but there are no ropes or rats. There's no likes. There's no pose. There's, there's just so much missing, and for what? Why? Why'd you take out everything that ever made the Zelda franchise good and just replace it with something that looks kind of similar and has a Zelda name slapped on it, but doesn't actually have any of the core fundamental stuff in it? Like, this map is covered in references to previous Zelda characters. There's Tingle Island and Mito. Mito is, there's a place in the Korok Forest named after him, and like all this stuff, and I'm just like, okay, cool, but one, those characters all lived in different timelines. Like, a bunch of them. Like there's characters from all the timelines here. And two, not all of these characters were famous. Not enough to be named on a map. And, certainly not after an apocalypse has struck and wiped everyone's knowledge of past historical figures, right? Like, 100 years after the apocalypse, are we still going to remember some random dude from Detroit and put his name on, come on. That's not how anything works. And you're just doing that to make the fanboys think that it's a Zelda game without actually giving them any of the things they've come to expect from a Zelda game. It's horrible. It's garbage. And the sequel is a Dynasty Warrior game. It's a prequel, but why? Why is it a Dynasty Warrior game? I mean, I'll admit I kind of like Dynasty Warrior, and the first tie-in was pretty good, but who asked for a second one? Who was so into Dynasty Warrior that they were like, man, they really need to team up with Zelda again. I just couldn't get into it when they were teaming up with fucking Fire Emblem. That just wasn't good enough. What the shit, guys? What the shit? So yeah, Breath of the Wild is bad. It's one of the worst games I've played in years. And, I mean, to be fair, I don't go out of my way to play bad games, but, it's really, really bad. I would say, if you look at the Zelda timeline, the release of the game's timeline, not the timeline in the book, I would say there hasn't been a Zelda entry this bad since the DS. I mean, it's just awful. Honestly, when I was playing through this game, there were many, many times when I was like, man, I wish I was playing Skyward Sword, because that game may be garbage, but at least it's a Zelda game. And, yeah, that's not good. That's not the reaction that I should have had. This game should have been better than that. It should have been good enough to make me forget about Skyward Sword, but it didn't. And it wasn't. And I hate it. And the fact that it got nothing but positive coverage, and the fact that anyone who was even remotely negative about it got panned into the ground, I hate that the most. This game does not deserve the amount of time I have given it. It does not deserve your time. It does not deserve a sequel. It deserves to die. So, yeah. Fuck this game. I can't believe this is the last thing Iwata worked on. Must be turning in his fucking grave. Yeah, that's all. That's the video. There's nothing else. Just fuck this game. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next life. Laters. Hey, I'm doing this instead of the normal end card. Brief addendum to the video. 1. The person who originally started Zelda Month, Peanut Butter Gamer, decided to do Mario Month instead this time because, fuck me. I'm kidding. He's great. Go watch his videos. So I made this video delay until Zelda Month for no reason, and I guess Zelda Month isn't happening, so whatever. 2, there's a lot of stuff I didn't talk about in this video, and I honestly could go on for hours. I didn't mention anything about how shitty the Korok puzzles are, or how repetitive they are, or how unnecessary they are. Or how the inventory system just does not matter because you always have max inventory no matter what your inventory limit is. Or, just the unbelievable shittiness of the economy where you can always have maximum rupees, for no effort. I didn't talk at all about the shitty parry system and how it adds nothing to the combat and doesn't even work like a regular parry system. I mean, I could literally go on for another 2 hours about all the flaws this game has, and there's so many. I didn't talk about the invisible ceiling. There's an invisible ceiling in this game, which like most games have, because duh. But but in this game, it's all about climbing, and some of the mountains that you can climb are taller than the invisible ceiling. I know that because I found out that there was an invisible ceiling while I was climbing a mountain, and it suddenly wouldn't let me go any higher because there was an invisible ceiling there. Exploration is our core focus, my fucking ass. Whatever. So as far as technical like quality, I have to give this game like half points because it is mostly not buggy. Like there's some physics issues, but it has a physics engine, so of course there are some physics issues. There are some frame rate issues, but only in certain places. And that's about it. Other than that, I never really noticed any game breaking issues. I never really noticed any glitches of any kind. And it looks nice. You know, it's got really good art and really good, you know, visual design. There's basically no audio unless you're in a fight or in one of the handful of specific places where they play an older Zelda tune to trick you into being nostalgic. But yeah, I guess the sound design is okay. It really just doesn't shine at all because there's hardly ever any music playing. But whatever, you know, it's whatever. So like 5 out of 10 stars. Everything about the gameplay is shit, but at least it like runs and doesn't break. So like you get half credit for that. And I mean, it looks nice, like legitimately amazing, honestly. The art team does deserve awards for how good it looks, but like it's wasted on such a shitty game. And as far as my personal enjoyment, I would say 0 stars out of 5. 0 stars, if that's allowed. If you say it has to be at least 1, then fine, it's 1. But but man, I hate this game. Now, I'm not saying there's no fun to be had, or that I never had any fun with it, because like when I first picked up the game, before I realized how all these systems worked, I was kind of having fun. During the first like 20 or so hours when I was just running around and I thought there could be new stuff on the horizon, it was fun. But after I realized that there isn't any new stuff on the horizon, it's just the same 17 enemies over and over again, and mostly just bokoblins. Like the others are rarely sprinkled throughout, but you know, I mean, I played the game for a solid 2.5 hours to get footage for this, and there's a bunch of enemies that didn't show up during those 2.5 hours. I didn't see a single fucking Wizrobe. I didn't see any of the little stone talus things that are the little tiny ones. I didn't see the Lynels or, you know, any of the desert specific enemies like the Molduga, you know. So yeah, it's a pretty shitty enemy variety, and fighting enemies makes up most of the content for the game. You fight enemies and you collect shit off the ground, and there's a bunch of different shit to collect off the ground, but the way you use that shit is really basic and doesn't actually rely on any variety. You know, it doesn't matter if you got sneaky river snails or sneaky mushrooms, you'll still make a sneaky dish either way. And so, who cares, you know? And it doesn't matter whether you got, you know, regular mushrooms or sneaky mushrooms or fiery mushrooms, because you'll still make a mushroom skewer no matter what. So, who cares, you know? And basically all the ingredients you can collect are either only used to be sold, or they're only used for food. Some of them can be used for like upgrading your armor, but upgrading your armor just reduces the difficulty of the game and makes it more bad. So no. Like there's nothing good to do in the game. There's nothing fun, and there's no reward for playing. So it's a bad time, and I don't like it. And it may take a while to realize that, and like early on you'll have a bunch of fun while you're still thinking, ooh, I wonder what's around this corner, ooh, I wonder what's around this corner. But after you ask that question enough times, you realize what's around the corner is another shitty shrine with another shitty puzzle and another shitty arrangement of bokoblins. Like, who cares? So that, and that's the video. I still have a bunch of charities linked in my description that you should totally check out. There is still a pandemic going on. I do have like a Patreon and stuff like that, but I would recommend you donate to charity first, because that's more important. And also, don't donate to anything or anyone if you can't afford to, because like that doesn't actually help anything. People need to be able to take care of themselves before they can do anything about the rest of the world, at least to a certain extent. Whatever. Anyway, this is the end card, so I don't have a second sign out, I guess. Bye.